kinds of ways with a computerized system, plus the tests are computer adaptive, which means they change in real time as the child is taking the test.
Now, what are they going to do with that?
We don't know yet.
Decide what you're going to work.
Looking at Delaware, it looks like they're going to use it to build their, I mean, that's what Delaware's saying, they're going to use it to track. Georgia, the same. In Georgia, the parents can maneuver within that career matchmaker, but they can't step outside the 10 choices. But the parents can maneuver within it, so they have a little more parameters. But it appears, what we're seeing now is that this is designed to say, this is your slot, this is your slot, this is your slot, which is what they did in the 90s. They did the same thing. And so I was recently in Delaware. There was supposed to be a debate with the secretary and people from the university, and they were all coming until they found out that I was coming, and then none of them came. So it was kind of an interesting day. But I was talking to the folks in Delaware about Delaware, and a mom in the audience said, yeah, she just put her kid out of the public school because this was happening to her child, and she didn't agree with the choices, so her only choice was to pull her child out. So when people say to me, which they do every time, what can I do? And this, I know it sounds terrible. If your children are in the public school, pull them out tomorrow. Because it's a battleground. And we don't fight wars with children in this country. So take them out tomorrow. Now, for a lot of people, that's overwhelming. So if you're a grandparent, instead of buying a doll, help with tuition. If you're a retired teacher, call the local homeschool association or one of these parent groups and say, you know, I can help teach chemistry or physics or whatever so that people have support. If you can't pull your kids out, and there's a lot of people for a lot of reasons that can't pull their kids out, then supplement. So if your kids are little, you can go online and buy, it's called Saxon, you know, like Anglo-Saxon? Saxon, S-A-X-O-N. Saxon math. There's actually a study done by a guy getting his doctorate at Carnegie Mellon who looked at, he was a Chinese fella, and he looked at American adult mathematicians and engineers, and he went back and said to them, what math did you take in grade school? And the greatest preponderance of them took Saxon math, and they went on to become mathematicians. And it's like $30. And you can buy it online. Buy the homeschool edition. The reason you buy the homeschool edition is that it tells you, as the parents, say this, if they make this mistake, this is how you fix it. So it gives you like some support. Start at, no matter what grade your little one's in, start at first grade and work up so you're sure you don't miss anything. Get a reading program that's phonics based. So supplement what they're doing in the school. Pull them out of those tests. Deny data wherever you can. Make sure you're doing what you need to do at home if you can't pull them out. But if you can pull them out, pull them out. Now, does that mean you give up? No. The American public education system is truly miraculous in the world. Because we are one of the only systems on the planet that does not use our schools to sort our children. We use our schools, or we did, to give them doors of opportunity. Our schools did create the Ben Carsons of the world. Those schools are worth fighting for. They're worth preserving. So pull your kids off the battle line, but don't leave the battle line yourself. Stay and fight for a system that is so special and so unique, because it really did say your past did not have to determine your future. It said you could be what you want to be. And that's worth fighting for. And that's important. And that's important.
Teresa has a question.
Yes.
I don't really need the mic. You know me, Jean. You go way back in the public school system, Jean, right from our local high school.
You dropped it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm Teresa Spengler. I wear a lot of hats.
Okay.
And I'm very involved in the public education in our community. So I am a public school advocate, just an FYI. I graduated from Middletown High School. A couple of you in this room have graduated from the public schools in the area. I think that the public schools are also a part of what the community makes them. And I think that we as parents have the opportunity to be involved in the system. So before you jump and pull your kids out of school, jump in and be part of the system to help try to fix things. Because I don't think that pulling them is going to answer the question long term. I mean, answer any challenges in the long term. So I think being an advocate and getting involved is personally and professionally, I think that's the best. First, I appreciate the opportunity to meet you and be here, because I learned a lot. But I do have a couple of things that I wanted to just follow up on, if you don't mind. Also, just to share a little information about some of our public schools here. Rhode Island doesn't have a tracking system. And just to say, thank God we don't live in Delaware, okay? Because that is very concerning of how they're setting those students up for their career and college readiness. Those are concerns for sure. I don't see Rhode Island going that path at this time, and I can only hope with advocates like us in this community that that would not be able to happen in our state. But the other thing I say, I ask is, since the scores haven't changed in a long time, and the Common Core is fairly new, the opportunity should be allowed for implementation for the process to actually get going. It is new. The communities around here have only implemented it recently. So there's a path, it's taking a path, and new is difficult, change is difficult, but Rhode Island hasn't gone that failure path at this particular time. And depending on where you live, I think the communities are looking at it differently and jumping into the Common Core and dissecting those standards and implementing a curriculum in a different way. I can vouch for Middletown. Middletown does differentiate teaching and learning. Students do have the opportunities to, if they are on a level down here compared to a student up here, in a classroom of 20-some students, those students are offered those wide spectrum opportunities. So I think that it definitely happens in other places. Those opportunities are not available for students. We in this part of our community, we're lucky that we do have strong public schools in a lot of ways. Don't suggest that's nationwide, because, and I'm not suggesting in low-level income schools, because you're right, it is much more difficult if they don't have a solid curriculum to be able to provide the students what they need because of the level of income. But in our area, at least I can vouch for Middletown, I know a lot of you are from Portsmouth, we do have a very solid curriculum in that sense of providing students at all different levels of learning, which is a good thing. The other thing is, early childhood. I'm an early childhood educator, and in the private sector, but as I said, I'm very involved with a public school system and have been for a long time. I've got 2 children in this system, middle school and high school. Early childhood, I know what you're saying about the Common Core. Right now what's happening is the Common Core goes to kindergarten. The pre-K standards are developed by the Department of Education. Those standards are not optional. So those standards are the foundation to implement those at an early childhood level to prepare the students for the next level up. I do teach 3, 4s, and 5s. So I understand what you're saying. However, it is amazing that children can do. I think a big part of our problems is that the families and parents do a lot more for children than when we were growing up. Gina and I are both one of 7, the youngest of 7. We didn't get a lot handed to us in a silver platter. We wanted to get laundry done. We had to go do some laundry and change some beds, and right? You know, we had to. It was part of that we grew up with that kind of those work ethics and those morals. And I think that's changed a lot. That our children in today's world are not outside playing all afternoon after school. They're on technology. They're doing more hands-on. We've got more crime, more concerns of letting our kids wander around the streets. And I think that's changed our society as a whole, and that has also changed what's going on in our educational system. We were growing up, climbing trees, riding bicycles. Our bodies were physically capable of sitting down and doing the curriculum that was put in front of us. Our children today are not capable. They're not capable because they're not physically capable of getting out there. Their muscles did not develop like ours. How come all of us sitting in this room and 90% of this island are successful citizens in our communities? We grew up outside, don't come in till the street lights come on or till that dinner bell rings. When you came home from school, you didn't sit down and do homework, you went outside and played. Now I know that we have a lot more sports today on the Quinnipiac Island than we did when we were growing up. But children's physical bodies were more prepared for learning than what is happening today. Little children aren't able to carry a backpack. They're not able to sit in a chair without falling off because they don't have the core muscle skills. So a lot of that stems from what's happening at home as well. Also, a lot more families are double family incomes. When we were growing up, most of us probably had at least one parent home. So our society as a whole has changed, our entire culture has changed. So we have to go with the evolution process of education. Does Common Core have flaws? Absolutely. Does PARCC test have flaws? Absolutely, there's no doubt. But standardized testing, if you think about what we had to do, we filled in the bubbles. We made designs in our papers filling in the bubbles. We're all sitting here today okay. When you go to college, if you go to college, you're going to do an SAT test. You're going to need to know how to do a standardized test. Whether it's the PARCC or something else, some kind of test needs to be developed for our students to practice on. And yeah, and I just think that there's flaws, and I certainly agree with that. I have big concerns about the data and how the data is being used. That's a big concern. But I think that we need to be part of the process, and maybe we could make changes. I don't anticipate, as you said, with the funding situation, that it's going to go away anytime soon. But I think that as a group, people getting involved can certainly help make a difference for improvements. Because I don't think it's going to go away. You know, I think that we're going to have to live with this. Eventually, it's going to go across the educational system, even into the private sector. At some point, I think that's going to happen.
We're here so it goes away.
Okay. You had a lot of points, so let me kind of walk through them. And thank you for sharing. One, they are community schools, which means we, the taxpayers, are paying for them. So you can pull your kids and still be involved in the school because you're paying for the school. So you don't have to leave your child in that classroom if you don't feel what's going on in that classroom is good for your child, just to be involved in the school, because we pay for them. So the entire community is part of the school, and we have every right to be involved whether we're a parent in the school or not. Point number two, we know that Common Core was not research-based. We know that these standards are fundamentally and fatally inappropriate for our youngest children. If a pharmaceutical company developed a medicine for kids that had side effects that were potentially deadly, would we say, well, we have to keep using it and give them a chance to make it work? No, we would say take it off the market today. We already know that this is fatally flawed. We knew it from the beginning. Those 500 early childhood experts, before the standards were even finished, were saying these standards are absolutely destructive for little kids.
Yes.
Math experts are saying that it'll put us 2 years behind. The writers of the standards themselves said they're not going to be high, they're not going to get you ready for anything but a community college. Why would we say give failure a chance to fail? So how this gets implemented, it's only a done deal if we give up. If we fight back, if we say not with my kids, not today, not now, not ever, yeah, we can beat it. How fast we beat it is totally dependent on us. But it is not the correct response when we know that they're developmentally inappropriate. We know that they're hurting children. We know that kids are in distress, to say give them a chance. How many children have to be hurt before that's enough children to be hurt? One is too many, and we've had thousands. It is true that the money is driving this. You are absolutely correct. And so this is not going to be an easy fight. And at the local level, pardon me?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I should ask, doesn't each district have the ability?
No.
Well, because Middletown has algebra in 8th grade and pre-calc and AP calc, and all of those programs are available in our district, so I'm not sure why that's not.
Because what's going to happen is you're going to get, as this moves forward, you get Common Core aligned textbooks, which change the way we teach from the earliest grades. So for example, I was in New York, and 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I had a district official who said just what you just said. Well, we still have all this stuff and it's never going to change, except they started moving into the whole curriculum, and this year nobody tested high enough. So they discontinued the calc class because not enough kids knew enough to get into it. You're exactly right. The poorer districts are going to change right away, because they're drowning in remediation costs. So they're slowing everything down to the slowest it has to be, like, in Philadelphia, New York, in those inner city schools, they're drowning in the cost of this. So they're already falling behind and getting behinder. I know that's not a word, but you know what I mean. But the wealthier districts, it will be slower, but it will still happen, because the textbooks will change from the earliest levels as they are now. So you have kids not being taught correctly those early fundamentals. You have standard algorithms being pushed from 2nd grade to 4th grade, and long division being pushed from 4th grade to 6th grade. So what happens when they get to high school? They're not ready for higher math because you've moved everything at the earliest levels. And what I hear all the time is that will never happen here, which is just what I heard in Delaware, until it did.
How long is Delaware implemented?
They're 2 years ahead of you, because they got phase 1 money.
They've been doing it for 4 years?
They've been doing it for about 4 years. Yeah, they started because they got phase 1, so they actually started implementing in 2010. They were one of the pilot states. So with 14, 15, they're ahead. So to say, well, that won't happen here, nobody thought it would happen there. Everybody thought, as I travel from state to state, and what's happening is each state is rolling, and the wealthier districts hold out the longest because those parents fight back, but you can't change the textbooks. And you can't change the assessments. So the curriculum moves to the assessment because the teacher evaluation is tied to the assessment as well. So in one of the wealthier districts in Pennsylvania, it was kind of funny, I didn't know this was happening. I was in a state rep's office and we were talking about it, and he said, whatever you want, I'll do. And he had been like totally on the other side of the fence, and so I was like, oh, okay, but why? He said, because our district is drowning in remediation because of this, our assessments are called the Keystones, and the district can't afford all of these extra remediation teachers. So all the kids who pass the test spend an hour and a half a day sitting in the gymnasium reading, so that they take all those teachers to remediate the kids who have to be remediated. And he said, so my daughter is wasting an hour and a half of school time a day, because even the wealthy, and this is a pretty wealthy district outside of Pittsburgh, it's one of the, like the belt around, that's wealthier, they can't afford all the remediation costs. And because the PARCC tests, because they're moving the bar, what they're doing is saying, this is so much more rigorous. So they inflate the standard, which means you're getting like a 30-some% pass rate. So even the wealthier districts are saying, but now we have to remediate all those kids. Well, where do you get the money to do all that remediation? So as this moves forward, it becomes its own circle. And what I'm saying is, why wait until the circle's complete when you can push back against the federal government now? I'm a big advocate of local control. I think you should be able to do in your district whatever you want. It's your district and your community. I don't live here. Do what works for your kids. My problem, and why I'm here, is that you've got the federal government using federal dollars to force feed their agenda into all of those local districts. And the only way to stop them is to say, stop. You have to stand up against them. So why wait until you have a disaster when you can stop them now? I totally agree with you. The public school system is definitely worth fighting for. I'm out here fighting for it every day. I travel the country saying, would you please stand up and fight for those local schools because they're miraculous. I agree with you. It is worth fighting for. But fighting for it doesn't mean you swallow the poison. It means you stop the poison and let our schools return to the control of teachers like you and parents like you and advocates at the local community level. Then you can do what you know works for your kids, because you know those kids. Mm-hmm. You know what's good for them. That's what I'm fighting for, and that's really what this is about. But if in the middle of the fight, your children are being caught in a tide, I can't tell you how heartbreaking it is when I travel, and like the lady in the back said, my daughter's pulling out her eyelashes. That's awful. And I hear that over and over and over again. So if your child is struggling, don't let them keep struggling. And what I hear over and over, and it's in every state. It's not just in this state or just in that state. I hear it again and again. So stand up for your kids. And if that means you pull them out, pull them out. Don't be afraid to do that. They're your children. Take them back. Take them back. Yes, ma'am.
Kind of a two-part question. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Kind of a two-part question. We've been very active in Rhode Island with, opting out of PARCC, refusing PARCC and we don't want PARCC and let's get rid of PARCC. Is it possible to get a decent test?
Yeah.
Are we wasting our resources?
No, and what's so ridiculous is you all took them.
We had them.
You either took the Stanford or the Iowa or the Metropolitan or the
But you
California.
said that the test had to be approved, validated.
Validated, no, approved by the federal government.
So, are there,
But are there still tests on the market that you can use? Yes. Those tests exist. Now, Stanford's been bought out by Pearson, which is a shame because they were the gold standard. But the Iowa is still there, the California is still there, and the Metropolitan is still there. So, and those tests, like you talked about doing the bubbles that we did, but they weren't high stakes. They were one measurement that we put against all the other measurements. They didn't count for promotion or graduation or teacher evaluation.
PARCC is not a graduation requirement.
It will
It
be.
will be in 2017.
We have to fight it now
It's
so
in
it
your
doesn't
contract.
become one.
It's a graduation requirement for the kids who graduate in 2017. So it is a graduation requirement for the children who are in high school now. So it is. And it's being used for teacher evaluation. And then you have the lower levels that are used, if you don't pass it, you have to go into remediation. So it's affecting your placement. So it is a high stakes assessment. It's if it affects, because based on that one test, you have to go into remediation. That makes that test high stakes. If you don't pass the test, you have to be remediated. If their kids don't pass the test, you cannot get a satisfactory evaluation.
I'm on the school committee. I've been on the school committee for 12 and a half years. I'm very involved with our public education and the PARCC testing and everything. And that is not what Middletown is doing. So maybe it's district-wide, and each district is different. I don't know. I understand the state requirements and the mandates, and I do get that. But I also know that the districts can differentiate.
In the year 2020, the districts will not have a say. It will be absolute law. In 2017, the districts may make it a graduation requirement. But in 2020, it will be an absolute federal law that every school, in order to receive any funding whatsoever, will have to make it a requirement. And that is, I can give you the information, and
And that's
perhaps you
federal
can
law.
pass it around to the rest of the school committee.
So why wait until it's on your, while you have the flexibility, fight back now. Why wait until they have their throat on your neck? So it's kind of to say, well, I can get out of that requirement now, so I'm going to wait until they kill me is silly. Fight back now. In every state, that progression is a little bit different because of where they are in terms of their funding. But what I find is people underestimate the level of federal control. And the U.S. Department of Education continues to push back and push back and push back. So the USDOE is pushing harder every day. Like they're stripping away special ed, they're changing teacher certification requirements to say it'll be national. There's legislation that talks about a national school board. So we've got a huge amount of federal pushback happening across the country. I am thrilled that your district is standing up against it, but in the end, you're not going to be able to stand up against it by yourself. You have to join the fight to stop the process. And to say it doesn't kill me right now isn't good enough. You have to stop all of them in order to stop what's happening, because eventually, they'll come get you. So it's kind of a progression right now, but you have to stop the progression where they are before you let them get further. And one more, because I think the time is getting away from us. Go ahead.
Just, it made an emphasis of state, and it's all about the money. I truly believe it's not all about the money. It's about control.
Yeah, but they're using the money to push control.
They're using our money to control us.
They are. But what you hear at the legislative level always, but then we might lose our Title I funds. If we push back, we'll lose our Title I funds. You actually can't. It's a formula grant. It's based on the poverty numbers. You can lose flexibility, but that's what people are afraid of, that the feds will take the money away. And as they're moving forward, they're threatening more and more to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Can states just say we don't want the money? Can you make do about it? I don't know.
Yes, they can.
Legally, they could absolutely do that. So far, no state has.
Municipalities would have to pick up the tab, though. Municipalities would pick up the tab.
Then you taxpay.
So what did we do before this?
Well, education wasn't, what people don't realize is that federal dollars come with federal strings, and federal strings are expensive. So when you actually do a cost-benefit analysis, there's some schools schools of thought that say you'd actually wind up with cheaper, better education without the federal government. But people are afraid to let go of it. It becomes a mindset that we can't live without it.
Keep it, I mean,
Yeah, let's get rid of it. Yes, ma'am.
I had a couple things. I totally on base with you. I have 4 children. I have a special needs with a speech delay, which will turn into a reading delay. He's 6 years old, kindergarten. I'm homeschooling him. I have a 3rd grader with no math sense whatever. Bright science, bright reading, but he was getting extra help in math 2 mornings a week as a 7.5-year-old. He had to go in at 7:30 in the morning twice a week to get an hour help in math. His math help was Dreambox and Play-Doh. They were little computer games, Common Core related computer games that he got for 2 hours a week. There was no one-on-one help at all for him. For a child with no number sense, who was wicked bright, got 0 help for pretty much for the year. So he's homeschooled. On the opposite end of that spectrum, I have a 5th and 7th grader, top 2%, almost perfect kneecaps, you name it, whatever else. And these 2 that I'm struggling with at home because I know they need the extra help. And then I kind of let those other 2 kind of flourish because they really don't need it, per se. And I kind of leave that in my head that, you know, let them go. They're going to do fine wherever they are. And I have decided that I've filed all the paperwork. I'm pulling them out of school if I can get the aid next year. They're all going to private school. My 2, especially the younger end, need the small classrooms, more one-on-one. My other 2, again, will thrive. So I've spent the last couple weeks meeting with guidance counselors, with their teachers at their schools, making sure I'm not making a rash decision.